Up until a few weeks ago, I'd never read anything by Neil Gaiman. I know, what was I thinking? But all that changed when I started reading American Gods. You see, even though it didn't fit my typical fantasy preferences, I found myself engrossed in this strange world of unfamiliarity and mystery. I enjoyed the style of prose, the storytelling, and the characters themselves. And while learning more about Neil Gaiman as a writer, I became particularly interested in one aspect of his career. The fact that he's experimented so much and written so many different types of story. And this defining trait got me into his world and wanting to learn more. So when a few days before starting the Murakami challenge, I was beginning to feel a little bit burnt out, I chose to take inspiration from Neil Gaiman's experimental nature. And I decided to try out his writing routine to see if I could get back in touch with my love of writing and to mentally prepare myself for the biggest and hardest challenge I've ever attempted. So first, who is Neil Gaiman? There has been a lot to learn through my research, and I have discovered that Neil Gaiman is a prolific writer whose works have spanned multiple genres and mediums, from fantasy to horror to children's literature. One of his most notable works is the groundbreaking graphic novel series, The Sandman, which has been described as a landmark achievement in the medium. His other classic works include Coraline, American Gods, and The Graveyard Book. And Neil Gaiman has won numerous awards based on these works. In fact, looking at the awards section for each of his books kind of reminds me of the nutrition facts for really popular American snacks. The lists just go on and on and on. Gaiman's writing has been praised for richly imagined worlds, vivid characters, and intricate plots. He has the ability to seamlessly blend mythology, folklore, and history into his story to create something that feels both familiar and completely new. And for all these reasons, it is no surprise that his masterclass and his writing routine have become the subject of many videos here on AuthorTube. So I'm excited to dive into this writing routine and see what the hype is all about. So I was completely ready to dive into this routine and start experimenting. But because of stress and nerves leading up to the Murakami challenge, I was only able to sleep for 90 minutes the night before this attempt. Still, I decided to proceed with the experiment. So in this spirit of experimentation and stretching outside of a particular genre, I'm going to take some time here today to write something completely different that is not epic fantasy, that is not even remotely related to the project I'm going to be working on in a few days. And I'm just going to try to enjoy this writing process as much as I can. So with that in mind, the first thing that I need to do is actually decide what I want to write. Luckily, I have a very long list of ideas that I've cultivated throughout the years, so I'm just going to take a look through that list and see if anything inspires me, and then we'll get started. So there were 4 main ideas that I thought were pretty cool, and some of them really cool that I would like to write. 2 of these are a little bit more sci-fi fantasy, so I'm going to actually steer clear of those. One of them is really whimsical and fun and would make for a good middle grade sort of story. The other one would be more like a paranormal kind of thriller, maybe urban fantasy. And then the other 2, one of them is sort of like a political thriller, and then the other one, which is probably the one I'm going to write, and I don't know why I feel like writing this, but it's kind of like a horror psychological thriller kind of vibe. Oh yeah, and this originally came from a dream I had. It was such a weird dream. So the notes that I have on this idea are like, they don't make much sense. They're just like random run-on sentences, stream of conscious, me trying to figure out what the heck happened in the dream. So I'm going to take some time to come up with an actual premise here, and then we can get started on some of the more Neil Gaiman aspects of the writing process. That was easy. I just came up with a premise. Here's the simple one sentence. Sleep lab patient becomes suspicious of doctor as he's put through a series of increasingly strange and dangerous tests. So now that I figured that stuff out, I'm actually ready to get started on the beginning of these Neil Gaiman type steps. At first glance, the routine itself seems rather simple, but but each of these steps has a distinct purpose behind it.
Neil Gaiman, of course, writes using pen and paper, so that is what I'm going to be using. He uses a fancy fountain pen, but I don't have anything quite that fancy. I'm just using a simple gel pen as I normally do. I actually enjoyed writing with a pen last time during that Margaret Atwood video, so hopefully it will be just as enjoyable this time.
Neil Gaiman writes with pen and paper because he feels like it makes his word choice more purposeful, and it also makes him less attached to the words he's already written when transferring them from a notebook to computer. Second, he works in a dedicated space to get away from distractions.
So right here behind me, I've got my space. I'm going to just be using the living room basically. I'm going to use both of these couches potentially, depending on what's more comfortable, and it should be quiet, maybe not in the morning when people are getting ready, but once everybody's gone, I'll be here alone and it will be very easy to focus and write.
He's especially trying to avoid the distraction of his computer.
So I am going to take this here computer and put it somewhere else so I don't get any temptations to look at it or look anything up.
And third, he uses the practice of either writing or doing nothing to keep his mind focused on the writing and keep him motivated to continue.
This is the part of his routine I'm most excited to try because it seems super logical and because it seems like it may be effective at lessening some of the urgency I sometimes experience while writing, and at the same time allowing me to stay focused. And as I said before, Neil Gaiman does not let what he's previously written box him in. And that's why today I'm trying to write horror rather than epic fantasy.
So there's the routine, and now all that's left is to try it out myself.
Let's just get started. It's still pretty early, so I won't see anybody for a little bit, and hopefully I will have a nice, quiet, relaxed space to write this not so relaxing story. And so far the writing has been flowing out of me really easily. I haven't really had any trouble knowing what's going to come next, but I anticipate that it's going to get a little more difficult now that I've taken care of some of the basic stuff, getting the character in the situation. I've already managed to write a solid 2.75 pages. So far, I've just been setting up the story a little bit here, setting up the character arriving at this hospital, meeting their doctor, getting to their sleep room. I decided it was a character struggling with sleep because I have a sort of empathy for that type of character at the moment. So where the last scene ended, the character was in the sleep lab room. He was hooked up to all those machines and whatnot. He laid down in bed and he ends up going to sleep. I think what's going to happen in the story is that the character, he doesn't really have problems getting to sleep initially, but he has really bad dreams. That will help with some of the more horror kind of psychological thriller element, creating that tone here early on. So that's the scene I'm going to be writing next, his first nightmare. So I'm looking forward to this one here, and I think that since the writing is going to be a little bit more difficult probably, I'm going to get to use one of Neil Gaiman's premier techniques, if you will, and that is the old either write or do nothing. So that is what I'm going to implement here, and we'll see how that works for me. Initially, I had some trouble figuring out what the nightmare would be about, but once I got started, the writing began to flow, and I ended up writing another 3 pages. So the writing itself is going surprisingly well. I'm actually really enjoying writing this story. However, I'm running into a little bit of a problem. I'm getting kind of sleepy. I actually kind of nodded off, not all the way, but like eyes getting heavy, feeling like you're about to fall asleep while writing, which is not an experience I've had very often. But I do like this routine so far because there's something about writing by hand that actually is kind of nice. I don't know if I'm ready to do it as a way of drafting, like writing my entire first drafts. I like the aspect that you literally don't have the computer there. You can't even look things up even if you wanted to. I like the just sitting and staring off into space. But for now, I'm just gonna get started on writing another scene here. The next one is going to be one where he's woken up from the dream and he's back, and it's when he starts to get some suspicions about the doctor, when things start to get a little bit strange. And since I'm feeling kind of tired, thinking maybe a quick change of pace could help before I get into writing this next scene. So I'm going to do something that I wasn't really planning on including in this video, and that is I'm going to take some time to read. read, because Neil Gaiman is an avid reader and was always an avid reader throughout his life. And I remember him talking about when he was a kid and just how much he read. So I'm thinking that it might be good for me to read a little bit here, first to draw some inspiration, and second to wake up a little bit potentially, and to also include this aspect of Neil Gaiman's routine into this. What I'm going to do is just read a book that I was already reading. It's an audiobook, so I'm just going to have to grab the old computer again. But let's just get to the reading, and hopefully I will be super alert when I'm back to continue writing. So shortly after I started reading, I began to feel kind of hungry and realized that maybe eating some breakfast would help me to get some of that alertness and focus that I was looking for. Okay, so I'm finished my reading and breakfast, and I did find it inspiring, and I think I'm a little bit more awake as well. The only problem is that it was inspiring me to write fantasy. Anyway, I'm gonna get myself back into this whole psychological thriller-esque sort of world and see what I can do with the writing next. I think I might read through the end of the last scene a little bit since it's been a while and just kind of remember where I was so that I can get back to this and make sure that I'm doing a good job here with the writing. Let's just get started and let's just try to make the best of this feeling of alertness that I've got going on right now, because I don't know how long that's gonna last. So I just finished up another scene, the scene after the bad dream, where he talks to the doctor a little bit more. And I did introduce just like the littlest bits of things that feel a little bit weird, but the doctor is still being like super polite, super considerate, and just seems like an all-around good person. This character doesn't have any sort of distrust of them just yet. I think I would like it to be like a slow unfolding sort of terror if I was going to finish this story. So I did feel a little bit more alert during this session. However, I'm starting to get a little bit of the post-meal tiredness. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that I'm feeling tired. I'm getting the waves in and out. But either way, I did write quite a few pages here today. I mean, I don't know how many pages that is. I can count them, I guess. 1 second. I will count them for you. 7 pages. I would count the words, but I probably forget the count midway through. So I'm not gonna bother with that. I don't want to spend a bunch of time doing that. I do want to talk a little bit about the routine overall, but for that, I'm gonna go back to the couch where it's nice and comfy and I don't have to sit up quite so straight. So let's go over there and we'll talk about this routine a little bit. So overall, I did find Neil Gaiman's routine to be pretty fun. I like the simplicity of it. I like the fact that he specifically is trying to stay away from the computer. I like the experimentation aspect, being able to write something a little bit different. I mean, I really like writing epic fantasy, but there are other things that I would be interested in writing at some point. I don't know. I have so many different story ideas that inspire me for different types of stories, but there is just one type of story that I keep coming back to, and you know which type that is. I started off this day feeling both tired and burnt out, and this state of affairs only made the upcoming Murakami challenge feel more stressful. But after taking some time to experiment and break free of all the external motivations around my writing, I was able to reconnect with this love of writing and realize that I don't need to feel so much pressure around this challenge, because at the end of the day, what really matters is that I'm getting to write a new novel. I'm getting to experiment, to explore, and to play as I create a new story. And my love of this playful process of creation is why I started this writing thing in the first place.